Hi everyone, I am Heather, and I want to welcome you to Magnificent Authors Podcast, brought to you by Magnificent Mamas. This is the show where we'll celebrate the magic of storytelling and the power of words. I'm your host, Heather, and each week I'll be sitting down with incredible authors from all walks of life to explore their creative journeys, uncover their writing secrets, and delve into worlds they create. Whether you are an aspiring writer, a passionate reader, or simply curious about the minds behind your favorite books, this is the podcast for you. So grab a cozy blanket, pour yourself a cup of tea, and get ready to be inspired by the magnificent authors who join us. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, I am Heather with Magnificent Mamas and Magnificent Authors Podcast. We are joined here today with Jamey O'Donnell. Jamey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jamey O'Donnell. I started writing during the pandemic. I've written 4 books: Hunting for the Lamb of God, Meth, War, Lust, and Felony Flats, a sequel to Hunting for the Lamb of God, which is Living for the Lamb of God, and I've just released my newest book last week, and it's entitled Epiphany.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your newest book?
Yeah, Epiphany is a horror thriller. It begins with an old man named Paul Nelson. He's on his way home, traveling to Virginia from California after checking on one of his vitamin businesses out there. And it's at the crack of dawn. He walks out of a diner in the middle of nowhere in the Nevada desert. And it's at the crack of dawn, and he walks out and he sees this young man slapping up this woman up against the hood of his 79 Monte Carlo. And a couple other people walk by and don't even pay any attention to it. And he felt he needed to say something, otherwise he wouldn't be able to look at himself in the mirror. So he tells the young guy, "Hey, leave her alone. Looks like she's had enough." Well, the young guy takes exception to the old man butting in, and he whips out a knife and tells the old man to back off and get away. Well, right about that time, the old man whips out a 38 out of his back belt, points it at the young hothead, and tells him to drop the knife. And so he does, and he lets go of the girl, and he starts walking back to his car, opens his car door, grabs her suitcase out of the back seat, throws it up against the sidewalk in between the diner and the front bumper of his car, and he tells her to get her son out of the car. And that's when the old man named Paul notices a young 3-year-old boy sitting in the back seat, barely big enough to even see over the back seat. And so she grabs the young boy, and the guy gets in his 79 Monte Carlo, and he takes off up the Interstate 15 and strands her there. And so the old man takes pity on her and offers her a ride to Denver, her and her little boy, because they're stranded. They're out in the middle of nowhere. She's got nobody to call, no nothing. And so he loads them up into his Hummer, and they start heading east. And so on the way there, he takes a liking to her, and he takes a liking to the little boy. And this is where the title of the book comes in. He has an epiphany. There's 2 epiphanies in the book. I can't tell you the second one because that'll spoil it.
Don't give away any spoilers.
Yeah, don't want to do that. So what he does is he on the way there, he decides he wants to help her and the little boy, and he offers her a job caretaking for his house in Virginia in exchange for room and boards and a small stipend, and she accepts. And what neither of them know is that she's being tracked across the country by her husband, and he's looking to find both her and the little boy and kill them both. And that's about all I'm going to tell you about the story. That's just in the first chapter.
Wow, that's wild. It sounds really good, though. Honestly, sounds like something I would enjoy.
Yeah, I think you probably would.
Definitely. So here's kind of a weird question. If your book was a piece of music, what would it sound like?
Probably Marilyn Manson.
Nice.
Yeah.
If you could give
That
your
is a weird. That
protagonist,
is a weird question. It was a great question, though. It was weird, but it was great. I like that. Yeah.
I like different questions, so if you could give your protagonist one piece of advice, what would it be?
Uh, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, he does everything right in this book.
That's awesome. Um, can you describe your writing process and your writing space? Do you write at home? Do you go somewhere and write?
So I started writing during the pandemic. I
Mhm.
started writing in 2021. Like most people, I was locked down in the house, didn't have a whole lot of things to do, nowhere to go. So I thought, I've got a book in me. I had started writing a book much younger. By the way, I'm 67 years old. I'll be 68 in April. So I've been around for a while. And um, before my son was born, uh, to the woman that I was last married to, and that was over 20 years ago, I started writing this book kind of about my life story, but not really. Everything was made up fictional. And we had gotten in a big argument. And part of the reason why we got divorced, we got in a lot of arguments, a lot of fought all the time. And anyway, I had the first 50 pages in print and the second 50 pages on my computer. In a fit of rage, she picked up my computer and smashed it into bits in the ground.
Oh
And I
no.
and I could not recover those last 50 pages. I tried really hard. So I became very discouraged. I took those first 50 pages, I put them on a shelf. I said, someday I'll finish it. Well, that was in 1999. Fast forward to 2021, 22 years later, I
Hmm.
figured, I've got a book in me. So I started to write my first book, Hunting for the Lamb of God, which, by the way, was awarded a Kirkus Star. And
That's awesome.
yeah, it
Is
was
it hard to
awarded.
get those? I should know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's very hard to get those. About one out of every 10 books,
Oh wow.
they'll they'll award a Kirkus Star that they review. So so that's when I began writing. I picked it up again in 2021, and my writing process is a lot different probably than most other writers. First of all, I don't write an outline.
I
Uh,
saw that you were a pantser pretty much,
yeah,
right, go with the flow.
yeah, that's what I do. I'll get up in the morning. First of all, when I write, that's all I do. I'm not working a job. See, right now I have to work a job to pay my bills because unfortunately I am the quintessential starving artist. I'm not
Yeah.
making a lot of money for my books yet, but that's about to change, I think, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Um,
Huh?
I'll get up about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, have a cup of coffee, go sit out on my deck, even in the freezing winter, have a cigarette. And I'm in Denver, so it's pretty cold. You know
Oh.
about cold weather. You're in Indiana, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
It's surprisingly it's 42 degrees today. It was in the 20s yesterday.
yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I mean, that's the way. That's how we have it here. So I'll get up about 3, 4 in the morning. I'll walk around for a minute, and then I'll sit down on my computer and I'll write a sentence or maybe a paragraph. And then I'll get back up, walk around for a few minutes, come back, and I'll do that all morning up until about maybe noon, maybe a little before, maybe a little after, until I finished a chapter. And my goal is to write a chapter a day because to me they seem like books within themselves. Each chapter is a book. Um, it's a storyline, and it's going someplace in particular, and that's what I do. And I do that every day. It usually takes me about 3 weeks to a month to finish a book
Hmm.
from start to finish.
Oh
I,
wow.
I'll just have maybe an idea about where I'm going to go with it. I may have a slight idea where I'd like it to end. I have no idea what's going to go on from the beginning to the end of the book. I pretty much write as I go, and
That's
that's
how
my
I do
writing
it.
process. That's my writing process.
That's how I do it. I couldn't imagine outlining it or planning it. I'm not sure if you've ever experienced it, but I have a character in one of my books, and she started off as like the villain, and then like over time you see that all of her bad decisions were for the greater good. So
Oh
like
wow!
she just changed everything, like the way she went, and
And you
it
had
wasn't
no
planned.
idea that that's what you were going to do, right? It just kind of flowed
Yeah.
out of you.
Yep.
To me, that's I can't see writing any other way but that. I
Yeah.
couldn't see writing, and I've tried that before. By the way, I've tried writing an outline, and it's just like, what? It's just a
Yeah.
it feels more like a project than a book. And a book should be an extension of yourself. It should be an extension of your life. And I firmly believe that people should write about what they know. Matter of fact, that's one of the questions I'm asked a lot, and it's on my website on one of my pages, Q&A pages. You know, how do you decide what to write about? What should I write about? And I always tell people to write about what you know.
Hmm.
Something you have experience in, because the bottom line is your reader is going to know whether you have experience in it or not. They're going to know. They're
Yeah.
going to be able to tell, and they'll be able to relate to it a whole lot more if you speak from a firsthand knowledge of it.
I agree
So,
completely.
so that's how I write.
That's
Now,
awesome.
what I was getting ready to tell you is, um, I got off the phone yesterday with a guy named Bill Jones. He's one of the production managers at Magnolia Pictures,
Okay.
and yes, and they're very interested in turning Hunting for a Lamb of God, my first book, into a movie.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, so I was contacted 2 days ago by this agent out of the blue, and that's also one of the hardest things I've ever been able to do is get a literary agent. I still don't have one. I
Yeah.
self-publish everything, and I suppose if my books were to hit big, that'll pay off big for me in the long term, as far as I'll make more money off my books being self-published. Uh, but as far as getting them launched and stuff, I have a very, very small marketing budget. And,
Yeah.
so I can't really put money into marketing my books. I just do a lot of podcasts like this and get a lot of reviews and
That's
stuff like that.
important. Those reviews matter.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, whenever you pick up a book as a reader, it would be awesome to show support for the author just by leaving a review, so everyone else knows what it sounds like, what it's about. I think reviews are very important.
Oh, absolutely. I could not agree with you more. So I got off to so he called me. He actually called me. Now I've been approached by agents that say, this publishing company is very interested in your book, and they'll tell me it's this person, right? And first of all, I'll research the company, and it turns out it's the very head of Simon and Schuster. Well, first of all, the very head of Simon Schuster is not even involved in this kind of stuff. They're not the ones talking to authors. So there's the first red flag. And then when the guy calls me, he's got a Filipino accent. He's a white dude. So I know it's crap. This guy he was the real deal. He was the real deal I talked to yesterday. And so I'm very encouraged. So the last thing he told me, he says, I want to talk to you before I bring it before the board as a proposal to turn into a movie. He was very impressed with the book, very impressed with the storyline, with my writing process, everything. And last thing he told me, he says, I look forward to working with you. So we'll see what happens. It would be awesome to
That's
see my book hit the
exciting.
screen. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And just your name getting out there in that way is such an experience, I'm sure. And going to make your name is you. Your name is your brand, so to speak, and that would help you so much. I've had other screenwriters on here, and I've this one guy last season, like his name is so popular. Um, his name's Devin. But it was so cool because when I looked him up, like he had an IMDb page and so much information, and it's a name that people would know. So I think that's cool. Okay. So back to your book. Did you have to do any research for it?
A little bit as far as the territory, stuff like that, because it was a cross-country trip. So I had to see which parks were where, what freeways went through what states, places they stopped along the way, stuff like that. There's a stop that they make in Memphis to see his son on the way home, and see his son and his son's wife and their kids. And so, I did a little bit of research on that. Yeah.
Did you get lost down any rabbit holes?
No, no, now I have before. Oh, I have in the past, but I tried to get myself out of those really quick.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to fall into one of those.
I've fallen into many.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, I take it you write books too.
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, I had my stuff on Kindle Vella, if you know what that is.
No.
And they just recently, this month, got rid of it. But it's through Amazon. It's like the chapter by chapter type of thing. And they got rid of Kindle Vella. So now I'm going through the process of self-publishing stuff. So
Okay.
it kind of sucks, but it is what it is.
My first publisher was in Indiana, Author
Okay.
House. You familiar with them?
Familiar with what?
Author House publishing company.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, they're in Indiana.
Okay. Maybe
Like
up north, probably.
Bloomington.
Okay. I know where that is.
Yeah.
It's probably about 2 hours away from where I live.
Right.
Roughly. So I'm down like an hour from Illinois, an hour from Kentucky.
Okay.
So I'm in the southern part of the state. It's very different down here.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. Okay. So which characters surprised you the most as you wrote them?
Probably the villain in this last book. Just because well, see, that's the thing. I can't really tell you about it.
Can't do it without spoilers. Okay. No, yeah. I respect that completely.
Yeah, he was I tell you this, he's a very meticulous, inward thinking. He's got a lot of demons. He's got a lot of demons in him. And the end of the book it takes a surprising turn, and he's involved in that. So as it would have to be, it would have to be no other way.
What's one thing you hope the readers take away but haven't mentioned in interviews yet?
Well, I think we need to start talking about my first book that I wrote. So,
okay.
Hunting for the Lamb of God. It begins with it's first of all, it's current day, and it's a very realistic scenario. It's a geopolitical book. What happens is after years of crippling sanctions, Iran and North Korea collaborate together, and they construct 3 nuclear warheads, and they put them on container ships, one on each container ship, parked off the east and west coast of the United States, and they smuggle a third one in through the Gulf of Mexico, in through Mexico, and assemble it there. And this happens in May of, I believe it's 2021, the same year I wrote the book, or it might be 2022, I can't remember. But they fire all 3 of them off above America simultaneously, and it creates a super EMP, electromagnetic pulse, and it completely fries everything in the lower 48, southern Canada, northern Mexico, Cuba, and the Caribbean islands. It literally throws us back to the Stone Ages. And the book begins in this neighborhood in Colorado, just a suburb outside of Denver, called Cherry Knolls, and it tracks the footsteps of 2 families that live across from each other when this happens. This means no more food, no more food in the stores, no more running water, no more electricity, no cars, no phone, no internet, no radio, no TV, nothing. If you can just imagine what that would be like, just a complete blackout. But it's not, the lights aren't going to get turned on in an hour or
I think
two.
so many people would not be able to survive. They just
No.
don't have those skills. They
Well,
don't
they say
know what to
in the
do.
first year, that 90% of the population would die.
Oh yeah.
Because you got to also figure no medicines. Anybody that's on oxygen or on ventilation or is in storage or on a machine to keep them alive, they're immediately going to be dead.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah. So what the story does, it tracks the footsteps of these two families that live across the street from each other. One of the families has a year's supply of freeze-dried food and bottled water for the husband and the wife and their two boys. Well, the husband isn't there. The husband works for the Department of Agriculture, and he happens to be in Washington, D.C. at this time.
Oh wow.
So it's just the woman and her two boys, and then the woman across the street and her two boys and a girl. And they band together and they keep themselves alive. Well, what happens is most of the other neighbors, they have no food and no water. And so
Mm.
they start hunting their neighbors in the neighborhood as a food source. And so this is what they're contending with. Yeah, and it's
Ooh.
horrific. It's horrific. And so it tracks the story of them and then also the husband in Washington D.C. He gets moved to an underground base in West Virginia, and it's called Mount Weather. There is actually a place there where, in an emergency like that, where all of Congress, people that work for Congress, the president and vice president, would
Mhm.
go there, and they would survive there because they've got all the essentials for life there. So he gets transferred there. Well, while he's there, he discovers that there's an underground railroad system going all throughout the United States, and one of the
Oh
stations
wow.
there below them. And he finds out there's a station in Denver underneath DIA, Denver International Airport, and he gets permission from President Biden to take that train back to Denver to go find his family. And so he goes out there and he's escorted by two Marines in an MRAP, and they drive from Denver International Airport to his home, which is about a
Mhm.
good 35, 40-mile drive. And he, with the intention of bringing his family back to Washington, D.C. with him.
Yeah.
But that's when he discovers the family across the street is also living with them. And so those two soldiers will not let the other family come with them. So at gunpoint, he elects to stay there and tells them to go back to DIA. So from that point, they devise a plan to get out of the neighborhood, and they end up going with shopping carts, laden shopping carts full of the last of their food and water and tents and stuff like that. They go to they push these carts to a reservoir in Denver called Cherry Creek Reservoir, and that there they discover a whole colony of like-minded people trying to
Oh
restart
wow.
civilization. So he joins up with them, and then the book continues. Now there's a sequel to Hunting for the Lamb of God. That's titled Living for the Lamb of God. And I wrote that after I finished Meth War. So, so there's two books in that series. There's Hunting for the Lamb of God and then Living for the Lamb of God.
Yeah, I just was looking them up, honestly. Looking at them on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Mm-hmm.
Was it weird? You said you wrote the other book in between the series. Was it weird doing that?
Well, which other book? The one I originally
The
started, Meth War?
yeah.
Well, so yeah. So after Hunting for the Lamb of God, I felt accomplished. And I thought I'm going to finish that book. And so I did. And yeah, it was kind of weird because when I first started that book, I was very, very close to my drug addiction. But in the spirit of full disclosure, I should tell you that I used methamphetamine drugs from the time I was 13 until I was 45 years old.
Yeah,
And
I
most
read
of those
something
and
about
most
that.
of those years I used it intravenously. So meth war reflected a lot of my life. And so back when I first started writing it, I was very close to the time when I was actually doing it. But
Yeah.
20 years later, it was a little different because I'm so far removed from that lifestyle now. But it all came back to me. It all came back
Yeah.
to me. And so weird, no, different, yeah, it was different writing. Because like I said, you should always write about what you know. And I
Yeah.
wrote about that. I know about that stuff. But being that far removed from it, you kind of you change. You become a different person after a while.
Yeah. I agree. Would What genre would you say that falls into?
I would say that falls into horror thriller. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a fictional account of the Great Methamphetamine War in 1993 between in the San Bernardino Valley in California between the independent cooks and the Satanic Underground that was making meth. And so
My Go ahead.
that's what the book's about. There's a
Sounds
lot of
interesting.
murder in it, a lot of torture. Uh,
Nice.
it incorporates pretty much every myth, rumor, and half truths I'd ever heard while I was out on the streets using. I was homeless out there. I've been homeless here in Denver using, you know,
Damn. The When you mentioned San Bernardino, I was gonna say that's where my husband's father was born.
what he knows all of it. He'll know all about it, I'm sure.
Oh, probably. I'll have to ask one day. Excuse me. So you like to write horror. Is there anyone that inspired you
Yeah,
for like the horror thriller
yeah.
categories?
Stephen King. The two authors that I hold in the highest regard, and they're completely different. One of them is Stephen King, and I've been compared to him in my writing more than once.
Mm.
And I like to think I have my own style, but yeah. So that and John Steinbeck. Have you ever read any John Steinbeck?
I don't think so.
East of
Stephen
Eden,
King, of course, but
Grapes of Wrath, Winter of Our Discontent, of
okay.
Mice. Yeah, that's John Steinbeck. I just love the
Yeah,
way he writes.
I remember reading The Grapes of Wrath, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, and it was probably required reading for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's over like 20 years.
right.
So, yeah. Um, okay, if you could sit down with any author and pick their brain, so to speak, dead or alive, who would it be? Would
It
it
would
be
be
one of
John
them or somebody
Steinbeck.
else?
It would be John Steinbeck because he wrote about the human condition. They were just real people, poor people. He wrote about. He wrote as if he was them. It was almost like you were reading his autobiography every time
Mm-hmm.
you read one of his books because he had so much knowledge about the situation that he was writing in. You know,
Yeah.
he was just an amazing writer, and he moved you. I mean, the stuff you read, it he, it stayed with you. His stories
Yeah,
were
definitely.
so real, and it always took place. They always most of his stories took place in California, in the center of California, like the breadbasket, like around Fresno, stuff like that,
Mhm.
farmland, where ranches and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. This is going to be a weird one again. But if your characters could review your book, what would they say?
If my characters could interview my book,
Review.
review my book,
Mhm.
they would say probably some would probably say, "Hey, man, you really didn't get really X-rated. If you really would have told my story, it would have been a lot worse than how you described me."
Yeah.
Um, Some would say, man, you really captured it, dude. You really captured it. You nailed me dead on.
Nice.
That's what I think they'd say. They'd have to, because I did.
Yeah. Okay. This is gonna be a weird one, or I think it's weird. But if you had to write in any other genre that you have not written in, what would it be?
I've kind of been experimenting with that because my next book is going to be a collection of short stories.
Oh,
And I already have the book together. I've got 31 or 32 short stories. There's some that's love. Most of them are horror, thriller, uh, science fiction.
nice.
I don't know. So what genre would I write in? Maybe comedy. I don't know. Some would be comedy. Could be.
That's kind of a big difference from like the horror thriller
Yeah.
to comedy. Um, let's see. Would you rather be trapped in your own story or someone else's?
Well, that's kind of an ambiguous question because, like, depends on who else's story we're talking about. Um, I'd have to say somebody else's because I know how all mine turn out. None of them are good.
What about Stephen King's?
Oh, definitely not him. Definitely not him. Maybe you know,
Yeah, I think
that's
all
a,
of his
that's a
are
that's a tough question. I mean, because most of the stuff I read is horror thriller. So,
mhm.
I don't know. I have a friend of mine. Her name is Lori Markwart, and she just released a book. I've got it right here. It's an autobiography. It's somewhere in the music I'll find me, and it's her life story being a musician growing up in Wisconsin and Texas and stuff. I wouldn't mind being in her book, in her story, but then again, it's not fiction either. So
Yeah, that makes sense though. Let's see. Let's try a couple more questions real quick, and then we'll probably have to wrap up.
okay,
What book would you say you love that doesn't get enough attention?
The Stand by Stephen King.
I don't
I
think
thought
I've read that one.
I think. Have you ever read The Stand?
I don't think so.
It is completely different than most of everything he writes about. The stuff he writes about is total horror thriller, where The Stand is closer to Hunting for the Lamb of God. It's a it's a story where 99.4% of the Earth's population dies from this mysterious illness, and they call it Captain Trips. Is the
Oh, wow.
nickname for this illness, and everybody is gone, and so all of the people that are still alive are are visited by these visions that they have. It's either a vision of an old black woman on a rocking chair sitting on her front porch in the middle of a cornfield in a farm,
Hmm.
or the other vision is this dude walking in the streets of Las Vegas, and he's called the Walking Dude. His name is Randall Flagg. So he's evil, and she is good. She's in a farm in Nebraska. So all these people, they don't know why they're going this way or what they're doing, but they all end up either in Nebraska or Las Vegas, depending on if they're good or evil. And so, and no, those people, when they finally find her, they all come to Denver. All the good people from around the world congregate in Denver and they rebuild the city. And then all the evil people go to Las Vegas and they surround this guy, Randall Flagg. And it's a fight between good and evil. It's a long book. It's a wonderful book. I could not put it down. I had a really hard time like going to work. I would read it in the morning. I'd read it before I went to work. I'd read it as soon as I got home. I could not wait to read it. And I don't know, maybe it does get more attention But I very rarely hear it mentioned. The books I always hear mentioned by him are The Shining or It or
Yep.
Christine or, you know, Carrie.
I was thinking yesterday, actually, when I was scrolling through Facebook, I saw the diary of Ellen, or is it Ellen? Rimbauer from Rose Red.
Never heard of
And
it.
I was like, oh man. I don't know if I'm assuming it's real, but yeah, there's a book, in the diary of Ellen Rimbauer. I'm assuming it's by Stephen King, but it goes with Rose Red. Oh, no, it's by Ellen Rimbauer. That's weird. But that sounds interesting, I think. Um, what's the biggest misconception people have about writers?
Uh, I I don't know that they have any misconceptions about him. I don't know. I guess if I think of a writer, I think of some bookish kind of introverted kind of person that stays in his room and writes all the time, which is completely the opposite of me. As you can probably tell, I'm a big
Yeah,
extrovert, right? And I love people and I love being around people. At the same time, I kind of hate people too. It just depends.
I
It's the
get that
duality of
completely.
man kind of thing, right?
Yep. That's why I like to do the one-on-one with people because I do get a lot of introverts. And then every now and then I get somebody that can just talk and is so comfortable. You know, it's so funny because you expect writers to be introverts and they're not all introverts. So it's interesting, I think. Um, Another misconception I would say would be like everyone thinks, "Oh, I'm going to publish a book and, it's going to go really good and I'm going to get tons of money." And it's not usually like that, especially right
No,
away.
no. One of the hardest things for me to do has been able to get the attention of a literary agent. I've written 4 great books and I've gotten tons of reviews. By the way, I'd like to mention my website. Uh,
Okay.
my website is www.jameyoDonnell.com. www.jameyodonnell.com. There you can read about my books. You can read the first 2 chapters of each of my books to decide if you like it or not. You can read my story. I've got an interesting story. You can read all the reviews, tons of reviews. You can see the interviews I've done, the podcasts I've done. This will be on there shortly. I'll put this on there.
Nice.
Yeah, and there's a purchase page. So I would highly recommend people go to my website.
Definitely. And we will have your website on our social media the day that this airs so everyone can check it out and, links to buy your books, that type of thing.
Now,
Socials
which
to
book are
connect with
you going
you.
to review, by the way? Do you know yet?
Um, I think Epiphany sounds good, but they all are catching my interest now, so
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not
Epiphany is
sure.
a good one to start with. Yeah.
Definitely sounds really good. And I love horror, thrillers, stuff like that. So I think the last one I read, I've got a couple here actually that just came in the mail today or yesterday. But Timothy King's Seven Rabbits. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but
No.
he's like a self-published or indie author, and it definitely gets a little I'm trying to think of the word without giving it away. It's just not what you expect, and it gets a little dark, and it's gruesome for sure, which I like. So
Yeah, let me know about it.
definitely, I will. Let's see. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself through writing?
I think the most surprising thing about myself is that I found is that art has transcended art within me. Um, I used to be a singer in a rock and roll band. We released an album back in the 80s in LA. And we had bands like we opened up for bands like Black Oak, Arkansas, and Johnny Winter, and we even had band Poison open up for my band
Yeah, I
twice.
saw that.
So I mean, and I've always been in the entertainment type of. I've always had something to say in that way,
Yeah,
and I think the most surprising thing for me is how I've been able to cross that bridge into writing. I mean, I used to write the lyrics to my own songs, but it's nothing like writing books. And
yeah.
I've got something to say.
Go
I
right
still have
ahead.
something to say at this old age that I am. I still have something to say. And
You're
so
not old.
that was, I'll be 68 next month. I may not look
That's
old, but I feel it. Trust
that's
me.
not old.
Okay. All right. If you say so.
I do say so. I
Okay.
remember when I was a kid thinking 30 was old, but I don't think that anymore. And I
Yeah.
really don't think 60 is that old.
Okay. All right.
So, what kind of advice would you give to new or aspiring authors?
And I mentioned it early. I would tell them to write about what they know. There's a great deal of research that goes into anything that you're writing about, no matter how much you know about it. But
Yeah,
you should, for me to write about astrophysics would be a mistake because I know absolutely nothing about it. I don't understand the concept. So I would never do that. I would tell people to write about what they know. And, you know,
yeah, I could
everything,
never write about astrophysics either.
yeah. So, you know, people, people have stories to tell. And the trick is to be able to put it on paper. So on my website, I say on there, like Frankenstein, I write throughout the night, bringing paper and ink to life. That's what I try to do. I try to bring paper and ink to life. I want my stories, I want the stuff that I write to jump off the page to hold somebody's attention. I don't want it to be boring. That kind of defeats the purpose. If
Yeah,
if you want to read a textbook, go get a textbook, right? My books should not
definitely.
read like a textbook. So that's what I try to tell people. I tell people to write about what they know they have experience in. So 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 people can understand and hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I've had so much fun talking to you and listening to you tell your stories and talk about your books. I feel like I could ask you a million questions, and I
Probably
don't
could.
have the time to ask you a million questions, or I probably would. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Like I said, the day this airs, we'll have everything on social media so people can check it out. And the podcast will be on YouTube and Spotify as well.
I would just tell people go buy my book. Go to my website. Don't even do that. Just go to my website, read the first two chapters of any of my books, and I guarantee you, after you read those first two chapters, you will be buying the book because my books will grab you. That is a common theme in all of my reviews. Read the reviews. There are tons of reviews on there. Read those
That's
reviews. That'll
awesome.
really tell you a lot about my books.
I think that's awesome. And I couldn't do a book where it's, 12 chapters in and you still aren't getting hooked. I
Right.
like to be hooked right away, which in a lot of, writing things like tips and whatnot, they say, hook them right away. So, not 12 chapters later.
Right.
I like how you do that. That's awesome. Um, Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me and for us to be able to get to know you so much
It's really
about
good
your
to talk
books.
to you too, Heather, and get to know you. I always enjoy my podcast, but I've enjoyed this one a little bit more than most. And you're a very nice person, and best of luck on on your venture with Magnificent Mamas. You magnificent mamas, you. Best of
Thank
luck.
you. Thank you so much. I
You're welcome.
appreciate that. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Magnificent Authors Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to share another inspiring conversation with a talented author. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Magnificent Authors Podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming conversations with amazing writers. And be sure to check out Magnificent Mamas on our website, which is www.magnificentmamas.us, or on our Facebook page for more inspiring content from incredible authors. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What resonated with you the most? Head over to Facebook or leave a comment on our website and let me know. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep those imaginations soaring.